she did not respond well at all to this enclosure change. If you remember at the very beginning in part one of the things I said, if I ever saw my day gecko on the ground, I would be very worried, and that's basically what she did for almost the last week or so. All right, let's crack this box open. Oh, here we go. All right, here is one item in the box. I'm sure if you've been following Arcadia on YouTube or Instagram, you've seen this product. This is their Jungle Dawn LED bar. This is a 34-watt one. This was about $130, I think, Canadian, so it's a little bit pricey. It's not a cheap light bulb, but it throws off incredible light. In the description, I'll link to the YouTube video that really describes this. They do a much better job describing it than I am. This is gonna be fantastic for the plant life, but I'm also curious to see how much the gecko responds to it. I know after talking to Sam Parrott from episode 29 of my podcast, he said the more light, the more active, the more energy you'll find in your animals. So super excited. I'm gonna leave this in the box for now. We will get to that when we get to the lighting section of this series. And then the other two things in here are, one, I wanted to try Arcadia's Crested Gecko Diet. So this is the Sticky Foot Gold. I've just used Pangea for now. I use this for my day gecko as well. And I just wanted to see how they respond to that. And then I also picked up BioShot. So this is the BioShot from the Bio Dude. This is, well, you can read it right there. Basically packed full of microbes, and I just throw this in my substrate. I'll mix it in when I mix the substrate, and it will add this sort of microfauna to the substrate and get the vivarium kick-started properly. Welcome to part 4 of this build series. So thank you so much for joining. If you are new here, you haven't watched the other 3 episodes, I do recommend going to watch episode 1, 2, and 3. Number 3 is basically me just struggling to keep this thing watertight, so you may want to skip through that one. We are on part 4. This is where the build starts to get really exciting. We're doing the decor, substrate, drainage layer, and whatnot. So I will show you guys where I am now with this build. So I've done some work since I was last on. Boom. So I've set up some wooden decor. I will show you. I filmed how we did this. I'll walk you guys through it. So as you know, this is a custom reptile habitats background. They sent this to me. I installed this in the last part, and then I went ahead and installed some horizontal branches. Of course, you want tons of horizontal branches when you're dealing with geckos, so they have good places to rest. This is going to be my basking zone on this side. This will be warm, and then this side will be my cool side. So I guess we'll walk through kind of one thing at a time. The horizontal branches, I use silicone. Well, first I ran a board across the top and used masking tape to hold them in the place that I wanted to. And then I used silicone to fasten them in place. I let the silicone cure, and then I used the expandable spray foam just to buttress those sides, just to keep everything secure. And you can see these things are very secure. They're not going anywhere. And then after that, I used brown silicone, and I mixed together some cocoa fiber as well as some sand to kind of try to match that background as best I could. It's not a perfect match, but it's pretty solid considering most of this is going to be covered by plants anyway, but it does kind of blend in. I think it looks pretty good. And then I have these vertical branches. I love the look of vertical branches in vivariums. I think it looks really cool. Let's back up and get a good shot of them. Just sort of looks like you're looking into a forest, and I think that's really, really cool. So I got these. They've been treated. If you want to know how to treat wood safely, I have a video about it. And then I use spray foam to stand them up and support them. So these things are in here fairly well. They do wiggle a little bit. Obviously, there's a ton of leverage at the top of these things. And I mean, right now, the way they look is like something out of a Dr. Seuss film. But this is all gonna be submerged underneath the substrate. You're not gonna see this. But the reason I went so crazy on the spray foam is because I don't want the wood to be in perpetual contact with damp substrate, because eventually it's gonna rot and it'll compromise the structure of this wood beam and it'll fall over or something. So right now I have a ton of spray foam that's kind of protecting it. I'm also gonna seal that with silicone, and then we'll hide all this by putting, kind of like how I did up here, we'll use some of this, whatever substrate I end up down in the base is what I'll hide this with. So it'll just look like a tree growing out of the ground, and I have 3 of them. And that's where we are right now. Next steps are gonna be sealing these and sort of hiding them with the substrate, and then we'll get to drainage layer. All right, so if you're following me on Instagram, you know that yesterday was actually my year anniversary with the podcast. That was really awesome. If you haven't been listening to the podcast, definitely go check it out. There's tons of great info there. And I hit 1,000 followers on Instagram too, so that was awesome. So if you have not followed me there, definitely go check me out. I'm terrible at posting there, but it's still worth it. You can keep track of the podcasts. So I have completely, or as best as I could, sealed these foam pillars with silicone. It looks terrible, but keep in mind that the soil will be basically up to here. You're not going to see any of this. Anything that does stick out is going to be covered with sort of like the way I did this stuff up here, just cover it like that. I probably didn't need to put the silicone on this, and obviously it's not everywhere, but I just wanted to make sure I sealed those up as well as possible. I do not want that wood to start rotting because then it's going to fall over. I want this to last a long time. So this is always going to be submerged in damp soil. So we want to make sure that it doesn't get damaged. And now I'm going to add the last little bit of hardscape. So as I was saying before, I wanted to add a living wall. So I have these twigs. Right now it kind of looks a little bit clustered. I'm hoping that it cleans up once we're done. I have these twig branches that I have just taped in place. I'm going to silicone those down and then probably do some foam, spray foam, just to hold them in place. Again, the soil is going to be right about here. So I'm going to plant those pothos plants right underneath it and use these branches as a place for them to climb up to sort of vines, which will also allow the gecko, there's tons of room behind these sticks that she can go behind there, and that'll act as a little bit of a natural hide for her as well. So these little branches are pretty much complete. I'm just waiting for them to dry. After the silicone, I put some spray foam and then I re-silicone them so I could put the substrate on top just to kind of blend them in. I think it looks pretty cool. Though you're not going to see a lot of that because there's going to be a lot of vines growing on them, hopefully once that plant fills in. But for now, I'm really happy with the way it looks. Now we can get to some of the more exciting stuff too. Well, exciting for me is adding the drainage layer because it finally tells me I'm on my way. So I'm going to add some clay balls. I bought a giant bag of expanded clay that we're going to be using, and I have this little drain here that's going to go into the bulkhead. I just because it has a little bit of an angle on it, it's going to curve down towards the floor just so the actual drain section is, I want it further away from the substrate layer. You'll see what I mean in a second. It doesn't mean it's going to drain any sooner. I'm not, the bulkhead hole is still where it is, but this is just going to allow the actual input to be further away from the soil. So we'll put this in and then we'll do the clay. So here's the bulkhead, obviously. So this drainage layer will drain at about 1.5 inches or so deep. Once the water hits that level, it'll start to trickle out the side, which is perfect. You do want to have some water in your drainage layer just to help you maintain some humidity, but you don't want the water touching the bottom of the substrate. So that's the point here. So as I was saying, because my drainage layer is probably going to come up to about here, the screen's going to be there, I just wanted to avoid any substrate getting into that bulkhead and plugging it. So I have this. It's just going to sit in here. I'm not going to fix it in place or weld it into place with PVC weld. I'm just going to set it in. I'm just going to tilt it down so it's actually touching the floor. And all that's doing is giving me an extra centimeter or so to allow the drainage layer to come up to here, and then I can put the screen over top. All right, so the drainage layer is in. It's about 2 inches thick, so it's pretty deep. It's a pretty good sized drainage layer. I've missed this enclosure a lot, so I do want to have a fairly deep enclosure or a fairly deep drainage layer, but then that's still gonna leave me about 8 inches of soil. The soil's gonna come up to about here, so that'll be still a good amount of depth of soil for the roots to grow in, which is great. You can see over here is my bulkhead drain. So this is what I meant. Now this is gonna be, I get another centimeter out of it. So now the screen's gonna sit on top of that, and you'll probably still see the top gasket for the bulkhead, but now I don't have any worries about soil or substrate getting into there and plugging the bulkhead. So that's good. Next up is the screen, which is a little bit tricky because of these tree things in here. So I'm gonna have to kind of cut it out and see if I can fit it in. So I did kind of roughly measure out this screen, and then I cut these little slits right there where the trees are, and then I may have to do extra trimming as well. We'll see. So that's kind of rough. I'll clean it up. I'll cut some excess of this excess screen off, as well as I might have to patch. The good thing about these two branches is that they are directly against the wall, so nothing can get behind them. But this one has a gap between it, or between this and the wall. So I'll probably run another strip of screen just behind it, just to make sure nothing can get underneath. You are probably wondering what that is. Don't worry, it's gonna look a lot better than that. I'm not gonna tell you what it is right now. Try to take a guess. In a little bit, it'll become more clear. So the screen is down. I just have a little bit of the cocoa fiber in here because I was using that to just decorate the bottoms of the branches. So this is the part of the branches that will kind of stick out from the soil. So I just wanted to hide the foam and the silicone and whatnot. And now I am going to add some substrate as well as start planting the plants, which is the fun part of this. So I did mix my substrate already. It's over here. So here's my substrate. I already have it mixed. I basically just roughly followed Tanner from Serpa Design's recipe for substrate. So if you wanna know how to make your own substrate, definitely go watch his videos. He's got tons on here. I'll put it in the description below. I'm sure you've already seen his stuff. This is coconut fiber, some sedge moss, peat moss, leaf litter, sphagnum moss, quite a bit of charcoal, some orchid bark, sand to help some drainage. I just threw a couple twigs in here, and I think that's it. Hopefully I'm showing that time lapse right now of how I did it. So it's nice and springy. I think it's gonna work perfectly. I really like the way it looks. It smells awesome. So let's add it in, and then we're gonna start trying to plant the plants. So I'm gonna try not to make too much of a mess at this. So I also added BioShot from the BioDude. So that was one other thing that I added. So I'm not gonna fill it up a ton because I wanna leave space for the plant. So just kind of put the first layer down. Make sure this doesn't get behind the screen. All right, so these are the plants that we are gonna start with. I just want simple plants. I'm not the best person for taking care of plants, and I've already had these for a while and they've already not been doing great because I've not been taking the best care of them. So hopefully putting them in the vivarium helps them out. So this guy's starting to look really dry. This is just two sort of cheap bromeliads, nothing special there. And then a little dragon tree, which is actually native to Madagascar, which is kind of cool. And then just an umbrella tree. I'm gonna try to clear off the soil off the roots as much as I can because I don't really want to take in too much of the soil that's on these plants, and then we're gonna put them in. All right, so the first, or almost all the plants are in now. I'm not sure how well that time lapse worked. I'm guessing it worked terribly because it felt like I was standing in front of the camera the whole time, but my hands were muddy and everything, so I didn't probably get good shots. Anyway, the plants are in. I still have another bromeliad that I wanted to put here, but then I held off because I want to plant those pothos plants in the corner. Those are currently in the Day Gecko's enclosure, so I have to pull them out of there. I still haven't quite decided how I'm gonna do that or when I'm gonna do that. So I wanted to give myself some space to be able to plant that. But I like the way it looks. I think the soil looks awesome. The substrate looks very cool. It smells great too. There's a little mystery black tube at the top. And I have I have quite a lot of leaf litter as well, and a few sort of, well, I'll show you. I've been collecting leaf litter from that umbrella plant that's been falling off, as well as some oak leaves. And then, I don't know if I'm gonna use these or not, but they're pretty cool. I found a whole bunch of, like, on a tree, peeled off these bark with tons of lichen. I might throw those on the ground at some point just to give the isopods something to eat. I bought a bunch of dwarf white isopods and I have tons of springtails, so we'll be seeding that, the enclosure with that as well. So I guess for now, I'm just gonna cross my fingers and hope that the plants have made that transition. The soil is much better, the substrate they're in now is much better than what they were in. I just don't know if they're gonna take to the new substrate or handle that transfer from the pot to the enclosure. So we'll find out, and I'll probably set up some lighting for them as well, just while they're out here before the actual gecko gets in and whatnot. I am out of breath. Let me fill you in where we are right now. So I probably showed a time lapse of myself and Sam trying to get this into the corner. It does fit, it measures right. It's just, of course, that bulkhead is giving me a hard time. That thing is the theme of this entire build. It's just, the way it stuck out meant that it had to go in at a funny angle and there wasn't enough room. So I had to slide this entire rack over a couple inches, or maybe about an inch. Is very difficult to move. I had to pull the crested gecko off just to lighten it up a little bit. But it is moved, so this is somewhat in place. I haven't slid it into place yet because we have some work to do before I slide it in. So I gotta put the top screen on, as well as, let me go grab something. Here's the top screen. I already have a few nozzles set up for the spray system. I'm gonna show you guys all of this. I'll go through all of it. I'm kind of rushing through it at this point, and here's why. So I put in those vines. I'm really not happy with the way those vines ended up. Those pothos plants, there's way more vinage than I originally thought there was, and I think it looks a little bit messy, but once the light is in there and the plants start growing up towards the top, I think it'll fill in pretty nicely. So I put those in, and everything is planted. Again, I'm crossing my fingers, making sure those plants, hopefully they live through the transition there. But the reason that I'm rushing into things right now is because the day gecko herself was just in a perfect position to catch her this afternoon. She was just on the glass. She's a very, very timid animal. She's I shouldn't say that. Sometimes she's very timid and sometimes she's not. Right now she was okay, so I just kind of put a little Tupperware container over her and slid a piece of cardboard. For those of you that don't know, day geckos, you can't really handle them because their skin sort of sloughs off when they're frightened. So she's currently in this little tub, just kind of, I don't know, I don't really want to bother her too much. You probably can't see her. I think maybe you can kind of see her in there. So she's just hanging out. I just wanted to take the advantage of trying to do this as the least painfully as possible for her, so I can kind of rush through some of this stuff. It's pretty much ready to go. I just have to set up the humidifier, the fogger, the mister, and the lighting, but that can all be done once she's kind of in there, once I've kind of played with some things. So anyway, I'm going to put the screen on top, and we'll get, I don't know, we're gonna start with the top screen. All right, so the enclosure is in its place. So everything looks good. I have a bunch of cables and everything everywhere. So we're going to put the lighting in now at this point. So I have a bunch of different lights. So as I showed you at the beginning of the video, I did get the Arcadia Jungle Dawn LED bar. This is the 34 watt. I cannot believe how bright it is. It really, really blew me away. I'll show you guys in a second. To the point where I almost wonder if I should have got the smaller bulb. I know more light is good, so it's just a lot more light than I'm used to. Plus I have the UVB light and the heat bulb. But anyway, I'll show you guys in a second. I was just really surprised by the light. But if you listen to my conversation with John Courtney Smith or with Sam Parrott, we talk about how much more energy the animals get from more light. You cannot even begin to replicate the sun with light bulbs. It's very, very difficult to even get somewhat close. So me seeing this incredibly bright enclosure, I keep having to remind myself that I'm competing with the giant sun. So it's probably not as bright as I think it is. With my crested gecko, I have their little shade dweller bulb, which is just a little UVB bulb like that. It's awesome, and I made an Instagram post about it a couple weeks ago. I cannot believe how much more energy and how much more active my crested gecko is. He's 15 years old. He's never had UVB. He is out and about all the time. He's motoring around. It's really, really cool to see. So anyway, let's set up the lights. So let's start with the Jungle Dawn. So I'll run through my lighting really quick. I have the LED Jungle Dawn. I have an Arcadia 12% UVB bulb. Obviously you need UVB. And then I have a heat bulb. I have normally been using just a sun glow, like a Zoom Ed sun glow, 50 watt sun glow bulb, but I've decided to go with a halogen. After listening to Sam Parrott talk and reading a bunch of different stuff, halogen is better way to go because you have way more infrared lengths. It's going to be much better for digestion. And I bought a halogen light bulb, a 50 watt halogen light bulb for literally like $3. So I'm going to change out for this, and it's going to be a bit of a warmer color light. This is quite bright. The halogen is a little bit of a warmer or a redder wavelength. And then I also have another bulb that's going to go in here that's going to, well, I'll say that for a surprise. It's something that I'm really excited about. Something very simple. It's almost totally pointless, but I'm excited to do it. So I'll save that part. But the main light bulbs are the LED, Jungle Dawn, the UVB, and the heat bulb. Okay, are you guys ready? I think the effect will be cooler if I turn off my filming light. So you can see what I mean. I mean, it's a beautiful looking light. It's awesome. I love it. It is very, very bright. I'm shocked at how bright it is, but that's sort of the claim. I mean, it's supposed to be a very bright light. But like I said, I think we're just not used to the amount of sunlight that should be in an enclosure. So that is the first bulb. We'll get the UVB going. Wow, it's really amazing the fact that I have the UVB bulb plugged in and on now. It doesn't actually make that much of a difference in the enclosure. So I was really worried about the UVB being an additional light and gonna be flooding everything. But no, I think that's fine. So that is my 50 watt halogen. And by the way, the halogen is on a dimmer. So I will spend some time here setting. I'm probably gonna keep it very dim right now because I haven't had a ton of time to play around with it. I don't recommend doing that. You should really have everything set up for a while. But I'm going to keep it very low, and then I'll slowly ramp it up until I hit that basking spot. So I have two sort of basking spots. One I like to be around 85 degrees and one right around 90 degrees. So we'll see if I can hit that with this bulb. Lights are on. As I showed you guys before, I have these kind of cool pieces of bark, but I don't really think they suit this enclosure very much. Yeah, I don't like it. I'm gonna leave them. I'll put them in something else. All right, and of course we need to add our cleaning crew. So I have a whole bunch of dwarf isopods here. They're very hard to see. You probably can't see them. I'm just gonna dump this substrate in. I'm just gonna take this piece of cardboard off and brush any of them away. I did have some springtails, but I kind of killed them. The culture ended up dying for some reason. So I'm just gonna slowly have to dump some springtails from my crested gecko enclosure into here as they come. I'm never worried about springtails just because they always show up no matter what anyway. So these things are so small you can't see them. Alright, so I'm almost done this build. This has been kind of a nightmare. I'm very happy to almost be done. Unfortunately, the door didn't fit perfectly. Clearly, the thing is not quite square anymore, probably due to the branches, so there's a little bit of a gap. I'm going to have to live with that. There's still lots I want to show you guys. I want to show you how the lighting is going to work, the timing and everything, as well as that special feature that I want to do. I want to show you the misting system, as well as the fogger. Obviously, if any of you guys guessed, that little nozzle in the back that I kind of disguised is going to be the fogger. But for tonight, it is already 9 p.m. I have not eaten yet today. It's been a really crazy busy day, so I want to go eat supper right away, or breakfast maybe. And we got to get the gecko back in. She's got to get out of that temporary thing. The misters are about to go off in probably 10 seconds, so I want to see how they work to make sure they function. And we'll see how they functionally work in here with the screens and everything. And then, of course, I will show you guys in more detail how the whole system works, as well as the time, how often they're going to come on and whatnot. But my main goal right now is to get everything moist and wet to give the plants more humidity and get the gecko back in there so she can start getting used to everything. Well, right now the mist is coming out of the screen, so I'm going to have to fix those front nozzles. I'm going to have to direct these a little bit. But again, I'm going to go through more of this tomorrow. And in the back, can you see the fogger going? It's too difficult to see the fogger, but it's going as well. So I'll show you guys that tomorrow, and I clearly have to do something. I can't be misting the room every time those go off, so those front nozzles are gonna have to be very much changed. But anyway, let's get the gecko in there. So I don't think you guys are gonna get a very good look at this. I'd rather have the lights off when I introduce her to the new enclosure. It's just so bright, and it's nighttime, and I don't wanna have any more stress than necessary. So I'm gonna try to introduce her this as calm as possible, and I will show you guys footage of her when she's settled in. So it is about a week later since I have added the day gecko back into the enclosure. It's been an incredibly stressful week because she's a super timid gecko. I've never handled her really. I've never had to really handle her. Sometimes she's totally fine. She'll lick food off my finger, take food from a tong. Sometimes when I walk into this room, she skitters all over the place. So she's very temperamental in some ways. She did not respond well at all to this enclosure change. If you remember at the very beginning in part one of the things I said, if I ever saw my day gecko on the ground, I would be very worried. And that's basically what she did for almost the last week or so. She didn't spend the whole time on the ground, but I think it was just really bad timing, because essentially what happened is when she was in there, it started to look like she was going into shed. I don't know if that was a stress response or she was just due for a shed cycle, but when she goes into shed, about 3 or 4 days before she sheds, she loses a lot of the ability to climb with her feet. Her toes do not stick to anything. So she wasn't really able to climb things. So I kind of added some logs in there to her so she could walk up on. And she spent a lot of time in the lower half of the enclosure. And then she also laid an egg. So she was laid a clutch, usually she's only ever really laid one egg at a time. And she laid an egg. So it was like probably the worst time I could have possibly moved her. Not only was she shedding, but she was due to lay an egg. So after about a week, but I was very worried, but at the same time, I was not as worried because she was still eating and she was still pooping. There was everything other than the fact that her behavior was slightly weird was normal. So her food is high up and she wasn't necessarily finding her food, but I was spoon feeding her and she was eating readily, eating tons. So that really made me feel a lot better. Last night she was sort of climbing some branches. She still hasn't shed yet, so I'll show her in a second. And she actually jumped up onto my hand when I put my hand in there. She climbed up onto my hand and I was able to put her up onto the top branches, which she actually hadn't been on yet. So the top branches obviously are much better for her because you have the warmth of the basking bulb, everything, the lights are up there as well, and the food as well. So, I'll show you guys her in a second. You can see how bright it is. This is the LED jungle the Jungle Dawn light from Arcadia. It is super bright and I love the way it makes the enclosure look, but I basically left it off for this past week. I've been warming her up to that light by just putting it on in the daytime for about a couple hours and then turning it back off, just because it was just so bright that I didn't need to add any extra stimuli to her already super stressed mode. But now this will be the first day I've left it on the whole time. So I'm really happy with the way it looks. The plants are definitely looking pretty good. There's still some wilting in the back, so I think it'll take some time to adjust. But other than that, plants are looking quite good. I haven't seen any isopods since I added them, so I think that they're doing fine. Ironically, the drainage layer is completely dry. There's not even a drop of water that's made its way down there. It will take some time for water to work its way through the soil, as I missed it. So, what do we want to talk about? Well, I will say I'm very happy to be done this, because this was a source of stress. It was a lot of work to do, and then of course the transition with the gecko herself was stressful. Like I know the video that I showed was very dark. You couldn't really see what was going on, but I was able to transfer her in there on a little. Actually, she was on top of a snake hide that was inside the holding tub that she was in, and. But the whole thing I'm happy to be done with. So the last I had left you guys with was I was going to explain the cycles of the moisture cycle, the humidity cycle, as well as the lights. So let's start with the misting cycle. So I have basically Monday through Saturday. It mists 2 times in the morning, so once at 6 a.m. and once at about 8 a.m. And during that whole time from 6 till 8, I am letting the fogger go. So I can do that because there's a ton of screenage here. The screen's on the top and the screen's on the side, or on the front. When this fogger is running at full blast, I'll hopefully show you some footage right now, the fog and mist actually rolls out the bottom of the enclosure. So the air is constantly moving. So it's never creating a stagnant, humid air that's just ready to, breed bacteria. The air is constantly flowing, but it is adding a lot of moisture to the air, because that's one thing with the screen. Obviously, I have to fight humidity, but now I have the fogger. So about 2 hours in the morning before the light's on, the fog comes in, as well as some mist. So it's really simulating, some rain, some morning dew, but as well as the morning fog. You do not see fog during the day, and I think that's one of the issues that a lot of reptile people do, is that the fog looks cool, so we want to put it on during the day so we can see it. But when is the last time you've seen fog outside during the hot day? It doesn't happen. It's the sun, the heat from the sun will evaporate the fog. So fog happens either really early morning, when it's nice and cool out, or in the evening after the sunset. So throughout the day, I let the enclosure kind of completely dry out. There might be 1 or 2 spots of water left on plants, but for the most part, it dries out. It seems to dry out to about 55% or 50% on top, and about 65% near the bottom. It's pretty much 80% near the soil, of course, but so it dries out. Of course, the lights dry the air out, which is totally fine. And then in the evening, when the lights turn off, I do another mist at about 9 p.m. And then at 10 to 11, I let the fogger come on again. So that sort of simulates a little bit of late night fog. And then through the night, the enclosure stays relatively high humidity, usually around 80 to 90%, and everything stays fairly moist. And then the lights come back on in the morning. So that's the moisture cycle. So far, it's working quite well. And I did say Monday to Saturday, and on Sunday, I don't mist in the morning or in the evening, but I simulate sort of a daytime rainfall. At about 1 o'clock, I let the misters come on for a full 2 minutes. Normally, they just run for a minute. So the misters come on for 2 minutes. Just to simulate something different. I don't run them in the morning or the night. I don't want to soak the enclosure, but I still do run the foggers in the morning and the night on Sunday. But this is just something different for her, a little bit of variety in the day. And I think I was showing the mister earlier where the mist was coming out of the screen. And basically, I've found no way to fix that. It just happens, but it is such a fine mist that it doesn't affect this table. It's just a wooden table, and it evaporates within a few minutes after the mist. So I may have to problem solve that eventually, but for now, that's working totally fine. I'll show you guys the mister as well. So the mister is actually something I completely totally forgot that I had ordered. So it's not a Mist King system or anything, although I do regret not doing that. I think the next time I do a mister, I'll probably get a Mist King or something like that. This is just a diaphragm misting system off of AliExpress. So it's something you might have if you live in Arizona or somewhere very hot where you have a misting system on your patio. That's basically all this is. And it works fine. It is pretty loud. And I run distilled water through it so it doesn't clog it up. But for now, it's okay. The timer works well. Next time, I think I will go with something slightly higher quality. I think it cost me about $70. So at the end of the day, it wasn't that much more than a Mist King. Plus, I had to wait probably 6 weeks to get it in because it came from China. But anyway, it works fine. I do have it in a container to keep the sound down a little bit. So lighting has been kind of fun to play with. I spent a lot of time looking at the sun cycles in Madagascar, and pretty much the entire year it's a 12 and 12. It's almost, there's very, very little sway in the light cycle there. So I'm not going to mess with that throughout the year just because it's kind of a lot of work to change your timers and everything, and to get an hour less sunlight during the winter is not that much worth it. But what I have done is the lights are on for 12 hours a day. All the lights are on for 12 hours a day from about 9 in the morning to 9 at night. And this is what that looks like. So you have the halogen bulb, which is your infrared wavelengths. You have the Jungle Dawn, which is giving you full spectrum light, as well as the Arcadia the Arcadia UVB lamp. So that's giving obviously the UVB rays. So really trying my best to simulate the sunlight here. So during those 12 hours, that is on full time. But what I'm really excited about is I was actually able to simulate a little bit of a sunrise and sunset. And so an hour before all the sunlight comes on, or the lights come on, I have a Philips Hue, one of these just Philips Hue bulbs. So luckily I already have some other, just part of our home, we have some of these light bulbs in our bedroom and our living room that are on that Philips, I forget what it's called, Philips Hue Home or something. I'll put in the link in the description. It is way too expensive to do that if you're just doing it with an enclosure. But if you already have one of these systems in your home, it's pretty cool. So basically I can simulate a sunrise at about 8 in the morning. That light will slowly come on for about half an hour. It will fade in. At about 8:30, I then have the halogens come on, so that from 8:30 to 9 o'clock, it's just the halogens and that Philips Hue bulb on. So it's kind of a nice warmer type sunrise type light. And then all the lights switch on. And then at about 8:30 or so, or no, about 9 p.m., everything turns off except for the halogen and that Philips Hue. And then the halogen turns off about half an hour after that, and then the Philips Hue dims itself out. So at about 9:30 or so, everything's off. So you have about an hour sunrise and an hour sunset that are bookending the full time light between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. So that's been really fun. I'll show a time lapse of what that looks like on the sunrise and the sunset. It is pretty cool. It's definitely not something that's 100% necessary, but when I was talking to Sam Parrott from Herp HQ, we were just kind of chatting about the sort of extremeness of going from pitch black to all the light at once, which is not at all how the sun rises, and it can maybe create a little bit of a stress response. We don't know for sure, that was sort of speculating, but it is nice to have the lights ramp on and ramp off at the beginning of the day. But again, I couldn't really figure out a way to do this that didn't cost a lot of money. Now, I was lucky to have the Philips Hue system in my home already, so I had to buy this light bulb. The light bulb itself is like $35 or something, so it's not even a cheap light bulb. So it's kind of an expensive way to do it. So if you didn't want to go ahead and buy a bunch of, a light bulb just to do this, what I would recommend is let the sunrise happen outside before you bring the lights on in your enclosure, and make sure the blinds are open. So as the sun rises up, maybe your sun rises at 8 o'clock in the morning, sun rises, filters into the room. The room is a lot more, has ambient light, the room is illuminated, and then the lights can come on rather than going from pitch black to bright light. That's one way, that's kind of what I do with the rest of my enclosures. But this one, I kind of wanted to take the extra step. So I think that's everything. We have the lights, the humid cycle, the fogging. Let's take a look at the gecko. We'll crack this open, and again, she's still quite nervous, so I'm not really wanting to mess around with her too much, but we'll take a look at her, and you'll be able to see that she's deep in shed right now. Oops. She's got that sort of grayish blue look to her. She's very close to shedding. I'm guessing she'll shed either today or tomorrow. Normally she's a very light kind of lime green, but other than that, I really like the way the enclosure has looked. It has turned out. She's settling in now, thankfully. I think that is it. I think I've covered everything. The only thing maybe I didn't mention was temperature. So temperature wise, sort of on the warm ambient side, it's sitting at about between 86 and 87 degrees with a warm spot at about 90. Well, there's a few different warm spots. The warm spots range from 85 to about 91-ish. The cool ambient side's about 80 degrees or high 70s, low 80s. And of course, there's a bunch of different temperatures in the back into the 70s. And at nighttime, everything drops to about 73, 74 degrees. In the winter, it'll drop a little bit more, but that's totally fine. Madagascar will drop down to the high 60s at nighttime during the winter, so that's cool. I probably will struggle with humidity a little bit in the winter, although I do humidify the room, but we do lose a lot of ambient humidity in just general air during the winter, so I may struggle a little bit with the screen, but overall I'm happy with the way the enclosure has looked. I do wish I could open the sort of double sort of French door style on this enclosure. It's a little bit annoying not being able to access that side, but for the most part, the screen enclosure has been working great. Again, I don't recommend doing this exact thing, but I think other than the fact of converting the Zilla enclosure into this vivarium, other than that specific fact, everything else I think is a good guide for anyone wanting to get a day gecko. So you can see that it is actually a lot of work to get one of these animals, but it is fun. I spent quite a bit of money doing this. I don't even know how much I spent, but I do want to thank Custom Reptile Habitats for supplying the background. The background looks awesome, and that really helped me out a lot in this. I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do for a background, so this looks fantastic. And other than that, if you have any questions, definitely let me know in the description below. And thanks for sticking around. I know this took me a long time to make, and it wasn't a short sort of, I didn't blast it out like other YouTubers that can do it in a week or so. It's taking me a month or more, I guess, to do this. So thank you very much for hanging with me, and I hope you enjoyed the build. So I just got home, and as I said, I thought Ruby was getting ready to shed, and looks like she is shedding. You can see now she's getting back to her bright green. Let me open this without scaring her too much. And her feet are quite obviously grippy again. And yes, she does have very large calcium sacs or calcium glands there. That's how she's always been since I had her. I got her as a 4-year-old. They have never reduced in size. And she's going through shed right now. Perfect. That makes me feel a lot better.